Hey, Benton, don't crap your pants if you see a vampire out there.
Get lost. You wouldn't recognize a goddamn vampire if one jumped up and bit you on the end of your fucking dick.
Hello and welcome to Natsukashii. Today on Natsukashii, we're going to be discussing City Oedo 808. And on this episode, I'm your host, Core, and I'm joined by Shabes.
Oh, hey, how are you guys?
And Urban.
Hi.
Alright, so as a brief introduction to those who don't know anything about this OVA, it's a 3-episode OVA, 45 minutes an episode. It was released from 1990 to 91, produced by Madhouse, directed by the director of Ninja Scroll, Yoshiaki Kawajiri, with music by Kaz Toyama, who did Shin Cutie Honey, the soundtrack. So yeah, this is a pretty poppy, cool, fun experience. It's set in the far future, I would imagine, based on the visuals, and is very strongly action.
I think they gave like a date at some point too. Like it was like 2500 or something like that.
Oh yeah, they do.
I think it's
pretty
2808,
far in the future,
wasn't it? And that's what the 808 comes from?
No, I don't know where the 808 comes from. I just remember they mentioned like the year they wanted to look back at a year, and it was like 2000, like in
2043, yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
it's the pretty far in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Good thing they didn't choose a date too soon, because that's often a problem with certain sci-fi stories.
Yeah,
is
right.
that it's like the date is like 2 years ago, yet they have like flying cars and all sorts of absurd stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the Jetsons, just where it's like the year 2000.
Dang,
So,
Y2K was a thing. It gave us flying cars.
So
Shaves, this was your recommendation actually. So just give us a brief introduction to like your thoughts on the OVA, why you dig it so much.
Well, City Oedo, as you said, was directed by Yoshiaki. I always pronounce the first name not quite right, but Kawajiri is how I know the man. This is the guy who directed Ninja Scroll and Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. And I think Oedo is very much in the same spirit and vein of those two movies, in that they're very, I think you mentioned, like pulpy, and the designs are super like realistic and gritty. The action is bombastic. It just drips with like cool shit, like nonstop cool shit. And Ninja Scroll is kind of the not Edo period. I don't know Japanese periods, but like ninjas and like the samurai stuff. And then Vampire Hunter D is kind of like high fantasy, Final Fantasy sort of stuff. And so City Oedo is like the sci-fi of his work. He's done a couple other sci-fi. I think Wicked City might have been sci-fi as well. Yeah, I'm kind of talking. But yeah, like this was like his time to do like a gritty sci-fi thing that like the 80s. This was in the 90s, like 90, 91. But this is pretty much like what you think of when you think of like an 80s OVA. When you think of like an 80s sci-fi OVA, this is the stuff they were making. And it's so badass. It's really fun.
Yeah, I would say like character-wise, it's very 80s, but like aesthetically, it feels pretty strongly 90s. So it's a interesting blend.
Mm-hmm. I definitely like that like futuristic but like clunky aesthetic. It's kind of like how I would describe like the Ratchet and Clank games, as a like obviously less cartoony, but more like things are just kind of like put together in this kind of hunker junker kind of way, and I like that. If that makes sense. It's not as clean as like how we kind of see future stuff presented today, I guess.
Right.
So I think that's pretty cool aesthetically.
For sure, it's that cyberpunk, kind of like Blade Runner and Cowboy Bebop, where it's the future, but everything is very like the paint's peeling off the walls, and everyone's kind of wearing what they can. what they have on them, not the most.
Some of those outfits I gotta ask about.
Yeah,
Honestly.
they just kind of got what they have on. I don't know. Yeah, it's simultaneously advanced and dilapidated, which is
that's a good way to
awesome.
put it.
Yeah, I suppose we should introduce the main premise of this for those who haven't seen it before. So this series this of OVAs revolves around the story of these three criminals who are serving like hundreds of years sentences in jail, basically. But the government comes to them to use their skills, since they're obviously very talented at being bad, to help with the police force, like their own special unit. And by doing so, for every criminal they stop, they can get some time deducted from their sentence, hopefully with the idea of eventually attaining freedom. And in order to stop them from getting away and running away, they have collars that will explode if they try and do so. Very, very familiar premise. I can't say exactly what this like reminds me of, because I'm not a very strongly like I just don't watch a whole lot of action type of stuff in general, just because it's just not what I seek out, even though I do enjoy it. But I've definitely heard of this premise before in other media.
There's definitely a lot of elements here that have been done before. I don't know in context of the show when it was released, but there's a lot of stuff that have like the bomb collar and like the criminals working for the
Suicide
police
Squad.
force and
It's literally
of
Suicide
course.
Squad.
This was inspired by Suicide Squad, apparently.
I don't really know when the initial comic came out.
No, I'm hopefully that's not the case. I'm just kidding.
Probably it could have come before this, but I don't think it was directly. I don't think this was directly inspired by Suicide Squad specifically. But yeah, it's literally. Except the three of them aren't necessarily like superheroes or anything like that. They do have their talents. It centers on three characters specifically, and each of the three of them actually are the main character of each individual episode. So there's 3 episodes, and so the first one deals with kind of as centers around the pompadour guy who swears every single chance he can.
Is the name Sengoku?
Sengoku.
Yeah. The second one is the Mohawk guy with the visor. He's literally just jet black. Only with this crazy orange mohawk. And then the third episode is like the effeminate vampire-looking dude, Ben 10. I do remember the third guy's name. I don't quite remember
the second episode. It's Goku is his name.
Yeah, that was confusing the hell out of me, because I thought they were saying Goku, and I was like, there's a Sengoku and a Goku, and then Bento.
No, Goku. I think that's the Japanese.
No, I know that's what it was. But at first I thought they were just saying Goku.
in the one I watched, I think they just subbed it as Goggles.
Oh, that's funny.
For his name.
I actually watched it dubbed.
I did too. I did as well.
So, Core, did you watch it subbed?
I did watch it subbed.
That's
okay.
Good. That's good that we have different experiences for that then. Because
what did you think of the dub?
Oh, I was so happy with it.
I was like mixed on it, but I was more happy than anything.
Yeah. So I mean, the two things that like I think a good majority of anime fans, if they've possibly heard of this OVA, it's one of two things. It's either Bennett the Sage's review of this OVA, because of course he reviewed it negatively, because of course he did.
Does he have a positive review?
Yeah, a few of them.
I've only heard negatives.
A few. And the other thing would be what he ends up referencing anyway, which is kind of like, there's a video on YouTube. If you look up Cyber City Oedo, it comes up. It's like the second worst dub line in history. And they're wrong.
To be fair, I did not like that line.
No, they're wrong. I really like it. I've shown it to several people when I bring it, like, ever since I watched this for this podcast. I don't know what I don't know what it is, man, but this has been on my mind. Kawajiri Works just do this to me. They stick in my mind, and they're just like they're just great. And yeah, I've shown that particular clip where it's the Ben 10
what
episode.
was the exact line?
And one of the guys is like, "Hey Ben 10, don't crap your pants if you see a vampire out there." And Ben 10 says, "Get lost. I still can't pronounce it word for word. I've seen it like 20 fucking times."
He's like, "You wouldn't understand a goddamn vampire if we came and bit your dick off," or something like
yeah,
that. Like,
you wouldn't know a goddamn
hilarious.
vampire if it jumped up and bit you right on the end of your fucking dick.
that's what it was.
It's fantastic. Because that's just not something you get in any other anime. You know?
I feel like because it's such like it feels like a popcorn entertainment kind of experience in my opinion for me.
Definitely.
So it's like I don't mind if it's gonna be like silly. So like, it's okay to have like a line like that.
I mean, you need look no farther than their character designs to realize
Exactly.
it's not taking itself too seriously.
No, and I love that. That's probably my favorite part.
Absolutely.
of that.
Well, I mean, I think what makes it so much fun is that it has those core elements enough to make you realize that a lot of this is intentional. But at the same time, all the characters are playing this with deadly seriousness and like melodrama. So like it ends up like playing it straight. So I personally think it owns it. You know what I mean? I think it's important for an anime to be confident in the elements that it introduces, I think.
Yeah.
Because if it's just playing certain things subtle, like a lot of it can come off as like unintentional. For me, Kawajiri films, just everything feels very intentional. And like,
Yeah, it's very blunt.
yeah, incredibly blunt. Like there's a scene of like Goggles just like reading like a Russian book, like he's reading War and Peace in like a trailer at one point, and it's like, what are you reading? But it's in Russian, and you just, or like Czech or something, and it's like, what? Oh, it's really cool. Yeah, no, it's a Kawajiri thing, and like, especially if you've seen his other work already, it's like that's the sort of stuff that he loves making. Man, I can't get enough of it, really.
I'm curious, since we were talking about the dub, to hear what you guys thought of the music, because actually for this OVA, and this wasn't too uncommon for dubs of older shows due to rights issues, where along with it being redubbed, the music would also be rescored. And so for this one, the music was composed for the UK version, the dub. It was rescored by Rory McFarlane. So it's different in style. It's much more like rock influenced compared to the more like techno stylings of the original OST. So I'm curious about how you felt about that.
I mean, I didn't have much to say about it. I think, like, first of all, I probably should have found a better quality video to watch. And then the other part of it is I was watching it with headphones in. I do remember that OP, mostly because it lasted, like, way over, like, a minute. But it suits the world. Like, nothing felt, like, out of place, you know? In my opinion, it was fine. Like, I wasn't bothered by it in any sense, you know? Mm-hmm. But it also didn't blow me away, but I also wasn't listening, so it's hard for me to comment on that.
I do hate to not be too helpful either. I think I was just I was having too much of a blast with the dub, with how one of the characters literally would swear every other sentence, and very needlessly. But that was part of the charm and part of the character, right? So I mean, I was just on the lookout for like every possible chance at like another funny line kind of deal that like the music kind of went over my head. But what I did hear, yeah, it's rock influenced and particularly suitable. I think a lot of OVAs of this period kind of had similar music. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this had very similar themes to like Bubblegum Crisis or something. That's kind of what, unless there's a track that very particularly stands out, I'm like, ooh, nice OST. You know, you have that moment that's like, ooh, nice OST, right? Besides, I don't remember any particular moments like that. for me. But
I mean, you're making me think of Panty and Stocking right now, because that dub's raunchy as hell. But like, I recognize that music so well because it's like, it really stands out.
Yeah.
But with this, it was definitely more common among stuff that was airing at the time, and definitely for like the world it was in.
Yeah, and that's also kind of how I feel about the original.
Yeah, how'd you like
OST.
that?
Yeah. The original is just it's pretty unmemorable, to be honest. I mean, it works. Because I like when I was prepping to do this podcast, I was like, well, I had to like actually look up the soundtrack again, to listen back to some tracks, and it's very very just techno, very much like 80s, like late 80s style for like this type of story.
Gotcha.
It's just fitting into that techno synth heavy electronic sound. What I found was interesting was it was actually like kind of difficult to find the original soundtrack, because apparently the soundtrack for the dubbed version has a special place in a lot of people's hearts. I was like found a pretty well viewed upload of the UK soundtrack on YouTube, and there were a lot of people raving over their love for the series and for the music as well.
How'd you feel about that, Gore?
About people?
No, the dub soundtrack. Did you listen to any of it, or did you just kind of like glance over it a bit?
I've listened to a little bit. I mean, of course, it would work better in context.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's neat. It's jammy. It's fun. But it doesn't exactly do a whole lot for me.
Right. So you could go with either one, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Good to mention that, though. I was while what you're saying is true with like a lot of dubs of this period would have to replace the music because they wouldn't get those assets, and it would result in some really bad dubs of some other kinds where like it was very clear that they didn't have the music and they didn't have sample music, so it was like either very stock footage music or and they had to like make their own sound effects and stuff like that. So at least for me, I didn't notice that it was like a different soundtrack. So I think that's a compliment to the UK version for sure.
So I guess with the music and the sub and dub out of the way, we can sort of talk about the characters. So before we dive into spoilers, I guess we can talk a little bit more about like the surface elements of the characters and the general like setting, rather than anything specific, which we will get to. But I will say I really enjoyed the characters and their interactions. They're very, it's got a nice humorous twinge to it all. Particularly, what's his name? Sengoku, he's more of the like cocky, hot-headed.
He's the
hot-headed one. Yeah, the loudmouth. He's very fun to watch, and he sort of like is the central character through which we perceive a lot of the story, even in the other episodes that are about the other two members of their 3-man team, because he is the guy who is going to give you so much with which to like parse the story. He's going to narrate everything, whereas the other two characters are much more soft-spoken or just choose to remain quiet.
Yeah. Even then, the other two stood out on their own. I mean, I guess part of that's their archetype, I guess. I definitely found Sengoku the most interesting, I guess. He, like, really grabbed my attention. I like the banter he would have with his, like, robot and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that robot. That robot might actually be my character, let's be honest.
Yeah. He's like, and you just fuck off. He's like, I do not understand why I use this word fuck. It means to procreate, which is not appropriate for telling a robot to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about robots that are just... Robots are just great. Robots are great. I was watching Nanaha this morning, and they have... I mean, they're not technically robots, but the magical girls have these, like, gemstones that they talk to, and it's just, like... it's great. It's the best.
Gotcha.
So that's like the characters. But I think a big appeal of this series would definitely be the setting and the heavy like action orientedness of it all. I mean, definitely like Ninja Scroll by the same director.
I was
is
happy that
well loved by a lot
yeah.
of people.
I
And
was
definitely
happy that
ties
with
into this like, yeah.
Yeah, I was happy with that when it came to the setting. Every episode was very distinct and was different from each other, as well as centering around each character. They had the scenarios be very different from each other. The first episode, you have kind of a tower heist, trapped scenario, kind of an emergency, with this tower is being attacked and it's starting to come down and it's being attacked by like this mysterious entity and whatever. And then the second episode's more of kind of like I felt the second episode was a little all over the place, really, but like it had to primarily do with kind of like a super weapon, and it was a lot more like figuring things out and kind of, I don't know. It was more of a. It had
The
like
second
larger
episode was my personal favorite, though.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later.
No, definitely. It had a larger scope to it, I think.
Yeah.
And it had a lot more different things going on. Like kind of some romance, this mysterious like end game bad guy, a lot of different stuff. And then the third one was, it had like a supernatural spin on everything. Like the previous two kind of had some spooky stuff going on. But the third one was straight up vampires.
Yeah.
So that was it. So like all of them had like different vibes to them while keeping consistency in its tone with like the elements it was playing with and the sci-fi, and it all felt very cohesive despite doing different things every episode.
Yeah, I could definitely agree. I think the first one was my personal favorite, just because I just liked the character the most, I guess, Sengoku, and I don't know. Like, the other two, I seem to kind of like my interest would sort of fade here and there in the other two. Meanwhile, in the first one, it was more like grasped. I guess part of that is just I didn't know what was coming next, and then when I realized the next episodes are more like their own individual episodes as opposed to not like a overarching plot. I mean, I guess it still is, but you know what I mean. Like it's more focused. Right. When I realized that was the case, I was like, oh, and I don't know. I was interested enough, but my interest definitely began to wane as it went on. Personally, I don't know if anybody kind of feels the same about that or not, but
it's really cool. Core seems to like the second episode the most. You like the first episode the most, and I
Do you
actually
like the third?
much like the third one the most. So that's helpful.
There you go.
I ended up watching the third one like twice afterwards with some other people.
Huh.
Like I ended up like I watched all three of them with one friend, and then I kept thinking about it and like showing the clips to people. And at one point I was just like, let's just watch the third episode. You don't have to see the other two, really. You can if you want, but I want you to see how freaking badass the third one is.
I mean, I liked how it ended.
Yeah.
I'll definitely give it that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so interesting that we ended up kind of liking different ones.
Yeah. I'll say with regards to like the general like presentation, and I really like how vertical everything is. Like not only like in the cityscape, like you have these giant buildings that are going up, and like in each episode it highlights a different aspect of the verticality. Like because in episode 1, to keep things vague before we go to spoilers territory, like he ends up falling down, and there's like this sort of like very like in the depths of the system area, and then in episode 2 there's a fight on like this construction site, so there's like a heavy aspect of the verticality. And there's also that in episode 3 when they're in like the like spooky mansion type place,
Which you
in the
go
latter-
to via space
Yeah.
elevator.
Yeah. So it's like
it's
everything
in
has this
space.
like really strong sense of height that's just very cool and not super common. I feel like the element of verticality is often underutilized in action shows.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of also speaking on the environment specifically, there's not a lot of organic environmental pieces. It's like very man-made and just constructed and just like dirty, and it's like because of that, I think everything just feels like much more like close together and really tall. You know what I mean? Like even when those scenes specifically what you're talking about aren't present, the world itself doesn't really feel like a natural one at all. Like everything's just very big, but like, you know, you kind of get what I'm saying with that.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
Yeah, and I think that really just aids in what you're talking about with verticality specifically. Not a lot of open fields or anything.
No, definitely not.
The most open place is like space.
The final frontier.
Yeah.
So, I think it is about time that we talk about spoilers. But before we do that, for those whose interest is piqued, would you recommend this series?
I'd say yes. I'm gonna say though that I wouldn't go in if you're trying to like expect something like new or to like blow you away. It's definitely just like some good entertainment, but I don't know if it's. I'd recommend they at least check out one of any of the episodes at the very least. I don't know if I'd recommend all three. I'll go through all three if you want, but at the very least, I would say I'd recommend one of the episodes depending on which one they find more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not cream of the crop, you gotta watch this right now kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of other things that if you haven't gotten around to yet are probably a higher priority. But I think it's a very good representation of the era and the genre that it's coming from. So the 80s, I know it's 90, 91, but it's, the 80s sci-fi OVA, very aesthetic and like blue and detail.
Yeah, if you're looking for like 80s sci-fi with like raunchy language, it's pretty good.
And like gory, not too. It's
got-
actually not
yeah.
too gory.
But when there is gore,
Yeah,
it's,
they don't hold back.
it's something.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that's interesting is like the action and the gory scenes. It's very much like you feel it. Like it doesn't make it, because other series will make it very poppy and like that it's more focused on like the sense of like motion and excitement. Here it's very, very visceral.
Yeah, it's not
So-
meant to look exciting. It's meant to look like gross
Painful.
and painful. No, for sure. Would you
Yeah,
recommend
there were
it, Core?
multiple times where it was like I winced while I was watching
Yeah,
it.
and that's a good thing for this show.
Yeah.
But I certainly really dig it, especially if you're
Yeah.
a Kawajiri fan and haven't gotten around to this yet. Don't let other people tell you it's bad. Because, like, I mean, you could, okay, go ahead and pick apart stuff or things are trite or whatever. Be snobbery like that, I guess. But, like,
I definitely think it's not something you want to take too seriously.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's
But,
the whole point.
It's a blast, I think.
What about you, Corey?
Yeah. My ankle, I'd say I would definitely recommend it if you have, well, we're recording this Sunday. Let's say Sunday, a Sunday evening, and you want some fun, pulpy, supernatural sci-fi. This is going to be exactly up your alley. At least give one episode a try. I definitely think this style is not going to be for everyone. I'd say especially for newer anime fans, because this show like encapsulates, I think, a lot of the appeal of anime to fans who were getting into anime in the 90s and like early 2000s, when these shows, this and Ninja Scroll and stuff like that was what anime was perceived as being. Whereas now the general like style of anime has changed a lot with newer anime, and a lot of newer anime fans coming in on newer anime. This might not necessarily appeal to them, but I think it's definitely worth a watch, at least to try out one of the episodes.
I would definitely describe it as like a time capsule. Like, it's not timeless, but that's like a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're looking back at that era, and it's really representative of what that era is like.
All right, so with our recommendations out of the way, dear viewer, if you're bold enough or you've seen it before, we're now going to move ahead into spoilers. So I think we should just go episode by episode and give our thoughts, since each episode is extremely episodic, so you can sort of talk about them within themselves. So episode 1, Virtual Death, or Time Bomb, or Memories of the Past, depending on which release you had. This one's about Sengoku. He's trying to save people trapped in it's like an elevator, after they've been taken hostage, basically, and so he has to hunt down the guy behind it, is the basic premise. So this was your favorite, right, Urban? So
Yeah.
so give us some thoughts.
I think just generally I liked the banter. It felt like like kind of Pulp Fiction banter, you know? Very much raunchy, but like they're being sarcastic with each other. And I'm speaking with the dub specifically. I don't know what the sub is like as far as like delivery, but in the dub, it's enjoyable in that respect. And then also you just follow this really loudmouth, sarcastic guy around as it's also introducing like the story elements. And then, you know, when you get to the scene itself, I mean, I don't know. I just like seeing the main character, that main character specifically, interact with a lot of people in the situations. I like just seeing him get into rough spots or just kind of tell somebody off. It's just really enjoyable in that respect. It was really. You have to suspend some disbelief to believe some of the shit in this episode, but it's definitely enjoyable if you do. That's how I feel about it, man. It's just like really captures that popcorn like enjoyment for me more than the other two did.
I would agree, especially the scene where he falls down. Well, doesn't fall, but like he finds the mechanism behind it all, which is like so basically the guy who is hunting down is using the hostages because he wants to get to this like successful businessman who like betrayed him. They were like partners. He got betrayed because the guy was greedy and wanted to be more successful because he wasn't as successful as the other guy, and pushed him off the building. And he fell down, died, but his body like merged with the machines at the bottom, and so it's through that he's trying to seek vengeance. And Sengoku is fighting the machine, but the machine is predicting all his movements. So what he does is he just walks slowly in a straight line, and it's like the coolest scene ever. It's like, yes.
Yeah, and like the corpse itself, like, you know, it's the guy because he has like the name tag on, but his entire body, it's just like a skeleton. It's like this corpse basically, and it's like rising out of this like pile of wires. And it's super aesthetic looking. It's a very like.
It was probably like the most anime part of the series,
sure.
Honestly.
Oh yeah, bar none. And that's the good shit, man. That's like, oh, crap.
It's just like how could you come up with this idea? This makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I like it.
Yeah.
I wonder how you come up with it.
It definitely plays into that aspect of the supernatural.
Yeah, for sure.
It plays with.
No, like it makes sense to exist. It's just when you're seeing it the first time, you're like, why?
Oh, for sure. You're like, I don't know, why is this happening? It's like because it's cool. I don't know. Like,
no, I appreciated it.
Of course, it's a guy.
It's rule of cool to the nth degree.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think of this episode, Shapes?
Oh man, yeah. I do like episodes that focus on kind of emergency, high stakes stuff, and like there's a whole time where like the building is coming down, but it's so big that it's taking forever. Like it's like, and slowly you kind of see like the interior. People are starting to kind of like have to walk like on an angle, you know, like on a slant, because the entire building is tipped like the Tower of Pisa or whatever. and it's still going because it's this huge building, and like yeah, it and then people are in the elevator, and they're we mentioned the three characters, and they have like the hostage characters, but there's one in particular that is kind of like the female, not really the love interest so much, but like
She's
the
like
girl
a flirt
that's like chill with
the
them,
one guy.
Yeah, and she helps them on their later stuff. She has a really good line at one point in the third episode that's like, "Hey, I found that 300-year-old data," and this stuff like that, just really funny.
She was very cute. I
Yeah.
liked her. I wish there was more of her because she wasn't in it very much.
Right. And so like she's in this like elevator with everyone else. And
I want to see more interactions with her and Sen Goku. Honestly.
Yeah.
Thought they played off each other pretty well.
Oh yeah.
Now that you say it like that, when you say Sen Goku, it sounds like it's like an evolution of Goku or something.
Yeah, I'm probably saying it very wrong.
That's completely unrelated. I just thought it was amusing. Go on.
No,
James.
yeah, but and like you guys were saying with the final, I mostly remember it for the final encounter. I do admit that it kind of spun its wheels a little bit with like having to introduce everybody and and kind of like dealing with interrogating this one head of the company guy, and he's just there's this frightened look on his face for a while, and just talking with him. A lot of it kind of becomes kind of a blur until you get to that moment at the end where you're like, oh, this is what's doing it the whole time, and
right.
Yeah. But I do really like how the first episode in particular gives the extended kind of intro. Like the OP has every episode has the OP, but the first one had this really aesthetic, like all three of them are in like prison cells, and they open each of them up and whatever, and it's like, hey, here's the premise of this anime here, and they're like, all right, sounds good.
And then they're like, roll the OP, and then
yeah,
here we are.
Oh yeah.
I also felt like it did a good job of establishing all it needed to. It didn't feel like it spent too much time doing what it was trying to do. I feel like that was what I enjoyed about it too. Is just the pacing of this episode is good, for the most part.
Yeah, it's a good episode. So that's episode 1. I also thoroughly enjoyed it. Now episode 2, Psychic Trooper or Decoy or the Decoy Program, which was my favorite episode. This is about Goggles. He's like investigating this murder, which ends up being related to this experimental it's like a cyborg police robot.
It was like military, right?
Yeah, but it was being worked on illegally under the covers because they were using human experimentation, and because that's like one of the things they were also testing it on criminals, which was clearly illegal. But the thing is that they deemed it. They were like, well, it's the means justify the ends. And so, but at the end, they want to test it on a really capable criminal. So they use Goggles' his ex-partner to rope him into ending up fighting this cyborg police robot. And so then there's like a really big, long, extended fight. And basically the thing is like, if he can beat the police robot, then he'll be able to live, but he'll also stop them from being able to push this robot into the public forces and basically make their job no longer necessary. Which was the crux. And of course he beats it at the last with 5 seconds to spare, because their upper guy, the thing he does, he's like, you have so many minutes to beat to beat the bad guy before I blow up your colors. And so he sets the time for I think 15 minutes or something, or 10 minutes, and he has to beat it, and he does, and it's awesome. It's a really fun episode, and I think the big reason it's like my favorite is not just because of like the fact there is the chit chatty robot in it, but also because of just the big fight scene on the construction site. The way it's mapped out is really really cool. Is seeing them like fighting all across the places and like jumping up higher and everything.
Yeah, I definitely like the environmental aspect of that. It was cool.
It was a really cool fight.
I think my favorite scene from that episode is actually like much earlier, is when he was, I can't remember the exact context, but he was talking to this guy who was trying to remove his own collar. You remember? You know what I'm talking about?
At the beginning of the second
It's like
episode.
that was like the most brutal scene, and they didn't show anything. You know what I mean? I like love scenes like that, where it's kind of like it's up to your imagination to see like how bad it actually is, because you just really see Goggles' reaction when he
He
fails.
just kind of like touches his own collar. It's like, don't want to deal with that.
Yeah,
Don't want that happening to me.
and it really like reinforced like basically how stuck they were. You know what I mean? Like it kind of established, not established, but like reinforced, like I said, like the situation they're in. Yeah, what do you think of it, Shapes?
Oh man, I do like the character of Goggles because like he did kind of remind me of Jet Black in a way, and I always like characters that are very headstrong and stoic and like able to take a lot of stuff, I guess, and they're able to kind of overcome these odds. So I particularly like Goggles in a way with dealing with this. I also really liked the major bad guy he fights at the end with his like extendo arms and missiles and just really creepy like appearance, and
This
there's just a lot about it.
I think this episode was like might have been like the most brutal in just how many hits Goggles takes like as he's fighting this thing, because it's like they're like fighting and he's like on the edge of death, and then like his friends pick him back up and he goes back and finally like defeats it, and he's like it's like he takes so many hits, but it still feels like it. I felt like it was writing that line where it's like they take so many hits that, not that it's not like realistic, because I mean nothing in this is realistic obviously, but that it's like it destroys your suspensions of disbelief that they're actually in danger. Whereas I feel like this held that line where it still does feel like dangerous. And that
it's
he's
always a
actually at
matter of
risk.
how it's always a matter of how they get out of these situations, not necessarily an if. Even though, I mean, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like the briefness of the OVA, right? With like how each one was only like focused on the one character and everything. It could have given that feeling of like, oh, maybe they could kill this character off. This might have a bad ending to it.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, yeah, and that's just kind of out of exterior things where you get what the show is doing on a subtextual level. Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to episode 3, Bloodlust, aka The Vampire or Crimson Media. Yeah, this one is like, I mean, like the other two had like hints, but this one is just like, is just straight up, we're going full supernatural here. It definitely felt like a pretty, I mean, I would have to watch it again to see if maybe it was just my surprise that was putting this on me, but it did feel like a pretty strong change of character compared to the previous episodes. If you want to go into more detail, Shapes.
Yeah, give us the hyper view.
Yeah.
Sure. So this focuses on the more effeminate, mysterious Ben 10.
Man, I can only think about a sister family.
Yeah.
I can only think of
that's
Ben
a character
10.
from Urusei Yatsura.
Too many Ben 10s.
There's a character named Ben 10. Yeah. But yeah, so the sitch this time is well, there's somebody going around. There's a vampire literally going around killing some people. he comes across they come across a crime scene with the body, and it has 2 giant hole marks in his neck, and it's like, I literally can't say anything besides this is a vampire. We're actually dealing with a vampire here, and they are. Basically, like these mysterious killings are connected to a virus, kind of an antivirus that people are developing to beat vampires because it's a problem. And it ends up being connected to this girl that he knows at one point that was cryogenically frozen and then was turned into a vampire against her will. And she's kind of wrestling with this problem of being immortal and just not liking it, because like this is a really cool scene where she's like standing around these like ruins and stuff. It's kind of like next to like an abandoned highway with all these concrete blocks everywhere, and there's like kind of a river. It's one of the few scenes that have anything natural to them. Like there's hardly any trees in this anime, you know? And it's kind of like against like this pond and everything. And it's like, you know, I remember running around here having a good time. And then I had this like life debilitating illness, and I was cryogenically frozen, hoping that there'd be a cure in the future. And then I am now a vampire. Great. Okay. And then
I think they used her as like to try it out or something.
Yeah.
Like she was an experiment.
So that's what. Yeah.
Right. And
because they thought it might cure, I think, was the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
Well, she didn't die.
And then it, you know, like every other episode here, it kind of culminates into a fight with this ultimate baddie. This one is just the vampire who's, you know, doing the vampire things, except he's in this this giant this like kind of a mansion, but like it's where they have it's where they like have like a graveyard, basically. Like they have the people who are cryogenically frozen and like people who are like, you know, buried and everything, but like in space. Except, you know, I wish I didn't. One of the reasons I showed this to another person was just so they could see the reaction to the saber-toothed tigers. Like, so Benton is like investigating this area before the final boss area. Yeah, before he goes back to like fight the guy again. And he's kind of snooping around, and he's with the corpses and stuff, and it's a really cool scene. And one of them kind of opens up, and there's just a saber-toothed tiger that comes out. And he's like, oh. And the saber-toothed tiger opens his mouth, and it's this giant laser that pops. Just fires a laser from his mouth.
Yeah, that was kind of out of place, though. Well, not out of place. That's
yeah,
the thing.
Right?
It's like it didn't even occur to me, because I was just so like, yep, I believe this.
You're like, sure, why not?
Right. And it just happens. And so yeah, I don't know how I brought that. I just brought that up because it was cool. Just like Kawajiri put that in this thing. It's like, okay, now he has to get chased out of this thing from something. He has to like escape from like the guards. What are they? I got it. Saber-toothed tigers. And yeah, so he faces the vampire who is kind of like, it ends up like drinking the blood out of the girl that he likes. And he gets younger, and Benton has kind of a fight with him, and he ends up doing the Alien 2 thing, or Aliens, where he just ejects him from space. Like he traps him in like the airlock.
That scene was so cool. The way they visualize it.
And he ejects him from space, tearing his body into like a million
if you want to see somebody actually blow up in space, here you go.
Yeah, literally just whatever. But and my friend was like, please don't regenerate. Please just don't like have one of those anime scenes that the body just comes. Oh yeah, yep, there it is. He's like, I'm a vampire. What did you expect? Of course I survived that. And all the pieces come back and everything, as the classic like 80s OVA, like the skeleton and the muscle comes back on and everything. And he's like, well, and so Benton like shoves this his like kind of a baton stick, which has like the antidote they were developing, basically the wooden stake into the guy.
Yeah, literally, that was what it was.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was pretty
And then
blatant.
and that's when he kind of disintegrates and boom. Yeah, but there's also this side plot that didn't need to be there, but I was very happy it was. And that was this, oh, what was her name? Like Alicia or something. It was just this really normal name. And like
Listen, I'm
whenever they
still
interacted
recording.
with each other, they were supposed to be like their fated rivals, right? They're like, oh yeah, back in the day when we were like partners.
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I remember.
And she has just a ridiculous getup on, and I'm like, where did you get that? But she's like, next time I see you, I'll kill you, and he's like, you do that. Have a nice day. You know, she's like, yep, see you on Thursday when we meet up for our daily luncheon. You know, whatever. Just talks so casually.
No, you know what it was?
and
She
he's
looks like
"I'll
a
kill you."
female Duke Nukem. Like that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, she is like a female. Yeah. And then later on in the episode, he's just driving down, and Kawajiri's like, you know, this is getting a little dull. Let's spruce things up a bit. And she comes in on like her hover bike or her hover thing. It's just like a circular disc with like handles on it. You know, it's kind of like a scooter. I don't know. And she comes in, and she like stops him like a cop or something. Like she's pulling him over, and he's like, "Do we really have to do this?" And she's like, "Yes." And they're in a tunnel when this happens. They're in like a car tunnel, and they have like their dual like they charge at each other. They don't really charge at each other. She charges at him, and they both have like long range rifles. And they both have to like shoot each other, and it's like a duel, but in reverse. I don't know.
They basically are like.
They're jousting, but they
it's like
shoot
the
each
classic
other.
Yeah, they joust.
Western
That's what I'm.
setup
That's the
where it
word I'm looking
jousts.
for. Yeah. Yeah. So they just joust, and I don't know. Like the whole thing was just like.
And then he beats her, and she's like, "You always were a good shot."
He shot her right in the heart and everything. Oh man, and yeah, it was just like nothing but like, you know those scenes where like rose petals are flying everywhere, and like one of the characters kind of picks it up and it's frozen, and he has that thing from Nausicaa where like she like breaks the block of sand or whatever with her fingers. It's just like the fragility of life. Now she doesn't really say that, but like, you know what I mean?
No, I definitely get that.
It's oh man. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked it.
Honestly,
really enjoyed
the only thing that like, and I feel like for most people this might not be a big thing, but it's like been the one thing that's like continually like bugged me since watching it, is that at the end, right, after he kills the main bad guy, there's also the girl, who is also infected with this disease, right? But he used the antidote on the main villain, and so what he does is he puts her back in the sleeping pod and sends her off into space, so she can have nice dreams forever. Except I was like, the only thing that was going through my mind was like, what if she like gets hit by an asteroid and just is
That's how she
doomed to,
goes,
like,
man.
well, she still has the power that gives her immortality. So she would just die and then come back to life for eternity, which is like the most nightmarish thing I've ever like heard of or thought of in my life. Yeah.
No, I thought she was like I thought what it was that she like her life and being of her vampirism was like sucked out of her
see.
by the other vampire. Like he took like his only sustenance was from another vampire, you know? And so like she was like dying, I thought. And
Well,
you know,
that's what it seemed like. She had died when he did that, and then she was back alive. Like, at least
Right.
that was how I had interpreted it myself.
I
Though,
see.
you know,
I
that
thought
the
it
way
was
you
one of-
explained
I
it
thought
would
it was
make
one of
more
those
sense.
things where, you know, you decapitate the head and the head still talks for a few minutes before the character dies. You know, if you've seen JoJo. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I've been mortally wounded, but I'll have just enough time to talk.
Right.
I'm just like waiting for a
That's fair.
scene where a head rolls off in slow motion and it's talking to the camera as it's
Man, it's insane. Like, I didn't really process it until I was like listening to your like extremely long summarization. There was like so much just stuff happening, and that's a lot of the series. Is it's like all sorts of it's just a bunch of cool stuff. And he's like,
yeah, this definitely felt like a
this'll be
passion
cool.
project.
Let's throw it in there.
This definitely felt like a thing they
That's
wanted to do for
definitely
fun. Like that's something I appreciate about it. Is
Yeah.
it's very much got that feel. It's not really trying to be anything else.
Yeah. And what's neat is I feel like this series could have been 3 episodes or it could have been 300. Like the setup is pretty timeless, and like the way it just like it could work with a lot more episodes because it's so like episodic and just based around this very easily accessible premise, but with a very like world that has a lot to explore.
Yeah, I could see it. At the same time, though, I feel like if it went on for too long, it would get old. So I'm kind of glad they kept it at 3 episodes that are like 40 minutes.
Right.
For
That's
sure.
plenty.
I think it makes it easy to recommend.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's hard to
because,
get
like,
people
literally
into long
into
running
something
stuff.
like City Hunter. And City Hunter, I'm sure, is really cool, but like, it's hard to recommend to people.
Sorry, what? You cut out for half of that?
You know City Hunter?
City Hunter,
It's
no.
it's kind of in the same period, the same era. Not sci-fi, but it's like a crime thing. And that's like a decent show. It's like Lupin or something.
Okay.
But it's difficult to recommend those shows because they're very long and old. Whereas, this is like 3 45-minute episodes. Very, very easy to like, hey, check this out.
Yeah. So, I think with that out of the way, I mean, I would say I think we all would definitely recommend at least trying this, based on our earlier, thoughts. It's a good time. I thoroughly, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it has a lot of like cool elements to it that definitely make the experience worthwhile. So that's been this episode of Natsukashii. If you intend to tune in next time, we're going to be discussing episodes 1 through 10 of Galaxy Express 999. I'm very much looking forward to that, so be sure to be there for whenever that inevitably comes out, because this podcast has no schedule. But for now,
It's just being real, at least.
Yep, that's podcasts are hard.
I agree.
I've been your host, Core. I've been joined by Shabes or Caribou Coon
Goodbye.
and Urban the Myth.
Yeah, see you next time when we review Love on a Leash.
Bye bye.